Welcome, my name is Isabella Brusati and I am the founder of Isabella Brusati Consulting. I help executives and senior managers getting digital transformation right. This is the fourth video of the Fintech series, and in this video I'm going to talk about the potential of Fintech, especially when it comes to the unbanked. Who are the unbanked? Unbanked are adults that do not use banks and don't use microfinance to save or to borrow money. And the G20 has assessed that there are more than 2.5 billion people that are currently unbanked. So it's a wide array of individuals. They are mostly based in areas like Africa and Asia. This means that there is a great potential for Fintech to democratize finance and finally to bank the unbanked. So how come that there are so many people that are not using basically any kind of banks, or they are not using microfinance? Well, most of all is because they are based in quite remote areas, like for example areas where it's very hard to get by transports, and also areas that are not reached by the branches, for example, of a big bank. We also have to consider that it's not only an issue with being based somewhere that is quite remote, but it's also sometimes based on the fact that people basically live literally with the money that they are earning. So, they struggle sometimes to get to the end of the month. So we are not talking about people that basically have lots of cash to invest. So we're talking more about people that actually use cash on a daily basis for their interactions and for their transactions. So let's think about the local market that is taking place in a remote area, for example, in China. Or, for example, the same thing with the person that is selling vegetables, or is selling, for example, manufacturing things that they've created in a market in a remote area in Mexico. So these people basically would have to travel miles and miles and miles in order to be able to basically deposit their money into a bank account. Also, there are costs that are linked to opening a bank account, to the transaction, etc. So it doesn't make sense fundamentally. So it's much easier basically to use cash. However, things have changed quite significantly, and this phenomenon has started back in 2007, especially thanks to the mobile phones. So the transformation has not started with banking, actually started with mobile phones and with Safari.com, that is a subsidiary of Vodafone, so a TLC company, that created the M-pesa. M-pesa basically is a wallet payment that allows people to pay safely, so without running the risk of being robbed, by their phone. So these transactions don't go through a bank, basically they go through a wallet payment. And that's actually where the diffusion of the mobile phone, we're not even talking about a smartphone, we're talking about the old Nokia that doesn't even have an app. But basically it is possible for lots of people in these remote areas to get a phone, a mobile phone, and basically to use it to make safe payments. We are talking about a small amount of money, but we are talking about lots and lots and lots of transactions in terms of the number of people. So we can see that the roots of the revolution have started. So it's possible to democratize finance. The next step is going to be basically Fintech that comes in and also has a social impact on these areas. Let's think about the possibility of giving services to 2.5 billion people. I mean, it's going to be massive. How is it going to happen? So what's going to happen here? How is it possible? Well, we have to consider a little by little the price of smartphones. So the possibility to get an app a possibility to get a more advanced type of phone is being widespread also in areas like Africa, like for example Asia. When talking about Asia, I'm talking places like China, for example. Of course, I'm not talking about Shanghai or Beijing. It's more like remote areas. And the great thing about some of these areas is that there is no legacy. So on one side, the fact that they don't have fundamentally a structure is going to be a fantastic competitive advantage, because they can start literally from scratch and basically build from there. How is it gonna work? I mean, okay, they make some, payments, and so what? First of all, we have to notice that the fact that unbanked are using a mobile phone to make payments, so setting up an account via the mobile or by a bank, has been followed afterwards by those that are banked that want exactly the same type of service. Of course, banks are taking notice and they want basically a piece of the pie. Basically, by banking the unbanked with mobile phones and subsequently with smartphone is going to create more growth, and is going also to create more startups that are seeing opportunities of democratizing on one side finance, but also to get and make money. So it's going to be basically a win-win on both sides. Of course, not all the startups are going to be successful, but at least you start to create a cycle of money moving, startups, growth, entrepreneurship. People will start to become more literate and more knowledgeable. And you can see that little by little, the fintech revolution is going to start. There are going to be some problems that have to be addressed with regards to regulations, of course also safety of transactions, but we also have to consider that big data and API transactions are going to create the information that can be used for investors to basically flood money and pump money into those economies. So this is a phenomenon that is happening right now and that is going to grow. It's not gonna basically stop. And it's also a fantastic opportunity because it shows that fintech is not only about making money for the banks or for the startups, but it also has a social side because it gives people the opportunity to access a service that otherwise would be basically something that is not delivered to them, and it is not possible for them to access it. Cash is not going to disappear, of course. We are not just like, for example, Sweden that is thinking about, the Central Bank of Sweden is actually thinking about replacing the emission of coins with digital money. Of course, we are nowhere being there, but we actually are at a point whereby people that just up to 10 years ago could not access the banking system and could not access basically insurance, could not access loans, that actually are getting through a process that in a very short period of time is going to give them the chance to grow their economy and also better their position within society. In the next and last video of the FinTech series, I'm going to talk about some example of fintechs so that you will be in a position to explore this phenomenon and also the successful businesses that we have now. Take into consideration that the system is changing on a consistent basis because fintech is very, very fast. And there are plenty of startups that unfortunately don't make it, but there are plenty that actually become super big and leading players in a very small period of time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.